Thank you so much, Rick. Well, I'm all energized now after I heard Rick Perry, and I'm just looking around here, and I'm thinking about birds of a feather flock together, and Tony Perkins is here, and you heard from Louis Gohmert. I've just given you two names of people that came here to Iowa a long time ago to stand up for our values. And I have this flashback from about 1998 when we wrote the Defense of Marriage Act when I was a senator back then in the state senate, and we wrote that marriage shall only be between one male and one female. And then you saw what the Supreme Court did with that, the Iowa Supreme Court, and Tony and Louis and others came to this state to help us. And they were on the Judge Bus Tour. And we went around this state to stand up for our constitutional rights, and you all came together and you bounced 3 rogue justices off the bench in 2010. Bounced them off the bench. And we've had battle after battle since then. And when I look around, I see people that have the same common beliefs. And so one day, yes, I do need to tell you this, that I go over to the Supreme Court to hear the oral arguments before the court. I have the privilege of sitting on the Judiciary Committee in the United States Congress. I'm a non-lawyer on the Judiciary Committee, and I think they have a disadvantage. They have to argue both sides. Me, I just argue the right side. But I went over there to hear the oral arguments on the 10 Commandments, and the front of the Supreme Court was all filled with protesters from both sides of the argument, and I had to climb around them and actually climb through the hedge to get to the door. And I got up to the door. It's a big white building. It was a bright sunny day, and my pupils were all shrunken down, and when I started to open the door, and it kind of opened ahead of me, and I looked up in there, and all I could see was a white shirt and a smile. And it was a guard, and I said, I'm Congressman Steve King here to hear the oral arguments on the 10 Commandments before the United States Supreme Court. And this is what I heard coming out of the darkness. I'm Moses, and I'm here to lead you. No kidding. The guard's name is Moses. And he's my friend today, and he's led me in, and he led me out, and he's led me in and out since then several times. But he led me into the chambers where I sat down to listen, and I began to realize that there was a Solicitor General from the state of Texas there to argue those 10 Commandments. He had put the case together. Now the Governor, Rick Abbott, was up front as well. Those two guys put the argument together to save our 10 Commandments, and that's when I first realized who Ted Cruz was. And now time after time after time before the Supreme Court, defending life, defending marriage, defending guns, defending parental notification for the state of New Hampshire, the list goes on and on. Our values are his values. And when I look around and I see Ted Cruz, then I know that we're in a fight somewhere, and Ted will either come to it or he might start it and not come to it. And I don't want to miss out on any of this, you know. And so when he came to Congress, we got to know each other pretty early, and we sat down in a little cubbyhole down in the bottom of the Capitol building and just talked about ideology and philosophy and policy and what our goals were. And it all matched up. It checked all the boxes for me. And then a little later, we went out and we sat down and we had a steak together, and that lasted for 5 hours. And that's because I was sitting where I could see that the rest of the restaurant lights were turned off. They left the light on over our table, and Ted had the Bill Hickok chair, so he couldn't see that the rest of the restaurant was set down. It matched up on everything again, time after time. We're trying to save this country from the Gang of Eights amnesty bill. And of all of the squabble that has been pushed out of that by other candidates in this presidential race here in Iowa, I want you to know that it's just real simple. Ted Cruz sat in that Judiciary Committee, and he offered amendment after amendment designed to kill the Senate Gang of Eight bill. And if you wonder about that, just know that Chuck Grassley and Jeff Sessions voted with him on those amendments. Keep that in mind. And Ted will tell you that the immigration policy is a product of the collaboration of Jeff Sessions, Ted Cruz, and Steve King. And he said that in the debate here the other night. And yes, and that 11 pages is there. I sign off on every bit of it. Ted will protect our borders. We will build a wall that works. He'll secure the border. He'll restore, this is the most important part, restore the respect for the rule of law. And if you wonder about life, it's just real simple. And I'd say this message, especially to young people, you only have to ask two questions. Is human life sacred in all of its forms? And we say universally, yes, human life is sacred in all of its forms. Then you only have to ask one more question. At what moment does life begin? That moment of conception. And once you get those 2 points down, you never lose a debate on this. Ted Cruz has never lost a debate on the life issue, on the marriage issue. He is a full-spectrum constitutional Christian conservative that memorized the Constitution in high school. And on the immigration debate, I couldn't get one in the House of Representatives while they were working against our interests in the Senate, and Ted was holding the line. So I rented a stage like this and a big speaker, and I announced a press conference for the day, 8 hours, and invited House members, Senate members. One Senate member showed up. You already know who. Ted Cruz. And I introduced him, he took the stage, and he spent 45 minutes giving chapter and verse of the things that you now know and have heard, and you can read on his website, 11 pages at tedcruz.org. But he delivered that in June 19th of 2013. There's no flip-flopping going on with Ted Cruz. His record is rock solid, and it goes back deep, and it's firm. And one thing that he does is, if he has endorsed a piece of legislation or authored a piece of legislation, that's his word and his bond, and we'll build maybe a policy around that, but we will not be changing those things that he's given his word on. He is a man of honor. And I've gotten to know Heidi. And I just say this about Heidi, a couple things. One is, when Ted walks into a room, he doesn't have to wonder exactly how many people in that room are smarter than he is. He has that gift. I do wonder every time. He doesn't have to wonder, but he's very humble and modest about it. But when Heidi walks in the room, then he has to wonder. They're a neat couple. They've got two beautiful girls. When you watch them interact with each other, you know their heart. And you know that there's a humanity there, there's a faith there. He wants to serve America. He will bring us in the right direction. And some of you were at the event that I hosted January 24th of last year, when we had a presidential faith and freedom event. And I stepped forward there that day, and I said to you that I believed that the next president of the United States had spoken from that stage. Probably the next vice president and part of the cabinet had also spoken from that stage. But I also ask you this, and I've followed through on my side of this, that every day, as consistently as you possibly can, raise up a prayer to ask God that he would use his influence to raise up a leader whom he will use to restore the soul of America. And I came to that conviction. It wasn't just picking a name off of a menu. I came to the conviction, and the conviction is this. It's a measure of the head, the gut, and the heart. All has to line up. And it lined up for me on November 13th, 2015, when it all settled in, and I knew it was right. It was right with my brain, right with my gut, and right with my faith and the calling from God. And I believe that God has raised up that leader. Now it's up to us to sustain him and carry him out of Iowa with a resounding caucus night victory on Monday night, so that Ted Cruz can take the springboard out of Iowa to New Hampshire and bounce from New Hampshire to South Carolina, and a victory in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. He's set up perfectly for that super primary in the South that runs across those multiple states on March 1st. We can carry Ted Cruz into the White House and see our values in the Oval Office of the White House of the United States of America. We can do it if we do it together. And let's do that together. Let's bring everybody we know to caucus on Monday night. Let's send Iowa to a great victory. Let's send Ted Cruz to the White House. Thank you.